So last but not least, Robert Tansley is Investment Director in Life Sciences at the Cambridge Innovation Capital, which he joined in January last year. And already I think Robert's a very familiar face around Cambridge. Certainly I'm bumping into him all over the place. Robert, I think, is a great example of someone who's had a translational career because he started out as a medic, spent many years working in biotech and pharma before he moved over to the really dark side and became an investor. So he's seen it from both sides of the fence. And for those of you who actually read the One Nucleus blog, you may have seen that Robert blogged in May, which was really a teaser to the presentation he's going to give today, which is entitled De-risking Early Stage Investments, Science, Markets and More. Over to you, Robert.
Thank you very much, Jane. I think the advantage of coming last is that you're able to catch some of the themes of going through. And I think the themes I've been picking up on is firstly that investment in early stage life sciences is inherently incredibly risky. Although I think Eric's comment about the 0.6% success rate in dementia puts everything else into context. But also that important that trio of good science, good people, good money. And I think Hakan and David and Eric have all highlighted that. And I like particularly the progenitor example where the quality of the good money actually makes a big difference in those companies. And what I'd like to do in the next 10 minutes is just build on those themes and talk a little bit through them. And also then give the example of one company which we've invested in, which is a spin out from here in the Wellcome Trust Sanger Institute. So a quick introduction to Cambridge Innovation Capital. We're an evergreen venture fund. We have close ties with the university and the Cambridge cluster in that we can only invest in the Cambridge cluster or in companies coming out of the university. We launched at the end of 2013 and we've just completed our 9th investment, and we're looking for IP-rich, high-growth companies, both in technology and also in life science. We have got funding from long-term institutional investors, including Invesco, Lansdowne and the university. And we believe that our permanent capital structure means that we can take a longer-term view, similar to some of the corporate venture arms, in that we don't need to give the money back to our investors. So we can take the long-term view and therefore invest in early-stage companies. Now, I appreciate that coming at the end of 12 talks on de-risking, there's been a lot of words, so I thought maybe just start with a few pictures to perhaps expand some of the themes of how you might want to de-risk early-stage investments. And if you look at where the significant clusters are, if you look in the US, where the Bay Area with Stanford, UCSF, if you look at Boston with MIT, Harvard, if you look in the UK with Oxford, Cambridge, and in London with King's, UCL, and Imperial, there's a common theme in that they're all parts of centred around the great universities, all top 10 universities. And this here is a Nobel Prize. And while we don't insist our companies have Nobel Prizes, I think the theme that there has to be great science is true. Being good is not good enough. You know, we're competing in a global market. And if there's better science elsewhere in the same area, then actually those are going to win. It's often a winner-takes-all situation. So an important part of our de-risking is that we will work with great science. The second aspect is that there needs to be a need, and I think the issue often and Congenica may be an example which I'll come on to, is often that need may not be current at the moment. There are markets which will develop in the future, and iPad is an example where the market for tablets didn't exist before the iPad. And sometimes you need to have that vision of where the market may go, but at the same time it still needs to have that market, and that's an important feature of any de-risking strategy. I think in the UK we're very fortunate in that we have a lot of non-dilutive funding, and these have taken disproportionate importance because a lot of the early stage ventures just have no chance of attracting commercial investment, and these organisations actually make a huge difference. And the one I'd like to highlight as well as the Wellcome Trust, as we here who do an enormous amount for science within the UK and globally, is Innovate UK, who obviously has building a great reputation, and we particularly like their transparency, their speed, and the fact that they look to back successes and the endorsement that they bring. And so that's another aspect. Taking ideas and taking the science as far as possible on someone else's money is an important aspect of de-risking. Finally, the fourth de-risking point is around giving the money to great teams. And I think this is something Hakan built up on and David mentioned. But I think that you can't be stressed strongly enough. If you look at any business plan, I've written a number of them, and then you go back to them 2 or 3 years later, and very rarely does the company actually look like what the business plan anticipated. And therefore this ability to adapt and to build on changing events is vitally important. And I like this slide because it reminds me of some of the companies I've worked on, in that you've got a few people here which are the management, obviously working very hard together to move this droplet of water. You then got, maybe this is the founder or the CSO who's obviously looking around for another droplet of water or perhaps something completely different in a different plane. And then you've got these guys who are just standing around watching these guys work, and these are obviously the investors. And I like this one because these two guys seem to be fighting among themselves, which again brings back some good memories of some of the companies I've worked for. Investors are often described as being sheep, and I think that's not the message of this slide. But I think this third-party endorsement is very important in that if you've got other people who recognise what the science or the quality, then actually that's really important. There's an element of a momentum as well. And those who are familiar with the Bay Area, you'll get tedious, the great mo of momentum. It's not necessarily the great science, but if people are believing in it and following it, actually it takes a momentum of its own and can get that success. And that's important not only from attracting investors, and I can mention some of the difficulties if you're in an area which is difficult, actually getting other investors may be difficult, but also if investors like it, and it's likely that partners will like it and finally customers will like it. And so if you've got people like MS Ventures or SR1 investing, they'll have no difficulty filling out the syndicate because of that momentum. And finally, money. And I think life science, especially compared with the technology, which is the other side of our business, takes a lot of money and you need to be patient. And this importance of patient capital, I think, is important, and we'll come on to why, how that might impact and what we can do with that. So, taking those 6 things, I'd just like to apply them to Congenica. Congenica is a spin-out from the Wellcome Trust Sanger Institute, one of our investments which we're particularly excited about. And what it's doing is in the area of genomic analysis. So, taking the whole exome and whole genome sequencing and taking all the variants, and each of us has perhaps 20,000 different variants, and analysing it in order to give definitive diagnosis. And this is incredibly complex, involves difficult probabilistic algorithms, it involves linking in with the clinical phenotype, and it's based on exceedingly strong science. Papers recently published in Lancet and also in Nature Medicine underpin the work that Congenica have. And it meets a need. Rare diseases or developmental disorders occur in a significant proportion of the population, and they often have devastating effect not only to the patients but also to the families. And the majority of developmental diseases are genetic in origin, and most of them remain undiagnosed because the diagnosis is incredibly difficult with existing technologies. If you look at single genes or gene panels, then they'll have a failure rate of about 95% each time, and therefore you get a diagnostic odyssey which may take many years in order to achieve a diagnosis. By analysing the whole exome and the whole genome in the future, you can increase that rate up to over 50%. And the founders and Tom behind Congenica have been instrumental in this new technology which allows the interpretation of the whole exome. And it's through this model called the Sapientia, which is displayed here. And non-dilutive funding in this situation has been critical for translating this great science into a commercially viable company. And actually got it wrong, the Deciphering Developmental Disorders, what I meant to say, the DDD, was a really far-sighted program which was sponsored by the Department of Health and the Wellcome Trust. And there's no way that this program, which started over 5 years ago, would have got commercial funding. But it's formed the basis for the research was formed the basis of Congenica. And furthermore, it's benefited from Innovate UK's grant to translate basically an academic project into a commercial company. Talking about the team, then in this instance, some of you who work here will know Richard and Matthew. Anyone who's done any genomic analysis will have used systems which have been developed by Richard, who's cited, one of the most cited bioinformaticians in the world. And they obviously have an incredibly in-depth knowledge of the genome analysis, but they've also combined with Phil Beals, who's a professor of medical genetics at Great Ormond Street, and that combination is very rare in this area, being able to link the clinical phenotype to the genomic analysis. And then that's combined with Nick and Tom, who have excellent operational experience, who've got a track record of running companies. Tom has been a director of the MRC, understands the research field, understands the commercial area. And together, we feel comfortable providing that money, and they have that ability to be flexible as this area changes rapidly. And an important feature of having that, the leadership team, is being able to attract other staff. And particularly in some area like genomic analysis, there's a huge competition for good quality people. And I think it's a real credit to the leadership team that they've managed to go from the three people, Anton, Eugene and Tom, in a very lonely porter cabin last summer, through to a Christmas party where it's actually it's not quite, it's a little bit more fun. And I think that's when looking at leadership teams, the ability to attract people is a vitally important attribute. And then the third-party endorsement, Genomic England has been very important in this area. And if you're not rated or validated by Genomics England, actually it's jolly difficult. And when we were looking at Congenica, the fact that Congenica had succeeded in the annotation assessment competition gave a lot of reassurance to us, and they were able to do this even before they managed to get funding, which is very impressive. And they've gone on in order to get chosen to take part in the pilot program as well. This third-party endorsement means that we feel there's lots of good sheep up ahead of us who appreciate their work. And then perhaps the most important third-party endorsement is actually getting customers. And recently announced deals they've done with Great Ormond Street and Manchester, and research collaborations, I think, again, have provided a lot of reassurance and de-risked our perspective. And then finally, where the small part that perhaps we can play in this, in that we're not sure where this path will go with Congenica, but it's likely to be a long-term view. Congenica, I think it has got the potential not only to work in developmental disorders, but also in other therapeutic areas, and has a very exciting potential, but only if it's allowed time and sufficient capital in order to achieve that. And so having a patient shareholders, and within Congenica they have ourselves and Wellcome Trust, and more recently Amadeus Capital, but also links to the holy trinity of UK bioscience financing of Lansdowne, Invesco and Woodford for their future development, I think is very important. And through that, I think we can also de-risk this particular early stage investment. And on that, I'll finish.
Thank you very much, Robert. One quick question for Robert, and then I'll have the rest of the team come up and join for just a very quick panel at the end. So any questions? Robert. Eric.
How many years is patient capital?
Well, as you know, the typical closed-end fund will be 10 years. And after 2 or 3 years, and they'll have 5 to 7 years before they have to seek an exit. When we raised the initial money, we thought that our average investment holding may be 10 to 12 years. There'll be some circumstances when 3 to 4 years may be appropriate. There'll be some circumstances where it may be 12 to 15 years. So patient capital is however long it takes to get to the true value inflection point.